Maya Blackwood stared at the brain scan on her computer screen, her coffee growing cold as the horrifying truth sank in. Every normal person she'd studied over the past 6 months showed the same terrifying pattern. The areas of the brain responsible for empathy and moral reasoning weren't just dormant. They were actively suppressed by a neural pathway she'd never seen documented before. As a psychology professor at Northwestern University, Maya had dedicated 15 years to understanding human behavior. She'd written papers on compassion, taught thousands of students about the goodness inherent in people, and genuinely believed that evil was learned, not born. But the data streaming across her monitor was destroying everything she thought she knew about human nature. The research had started innocently enough. Maya was investigating why some people became whistleblowers while others stayed silent in corrupt organizations. She expected to find differences in moral reasoning centers, perhaps variations in the anterior cingulate cortex or the temporoparietal junction. Instead, she discovered something that made her question whether she was losing her mind. Every single participant, from kindergarten teachers to charity workers to devoted parents, possessed what she was now calling the shadow circuit. This neural network appeared to constantly calculate the most selfish, manipulative, and harmful responses to every social situation. More disturbing still, it seemed to be the brain's default mode, only overridden by conscious effort that required enormous mental energy. Maya's hands trembled as she pulled up scan after scan. There was Jennifer, the nurse who worked double shifts at the children's hospital. Her shadow circuit had generated detailed scenarios about neglecting patients for personal gain. There was Marcus, the high school counselor who'd prevented 3 student suicides last year. His brain had mapped out precisely how to manipulate vulnerable teenagers for power and control. The implications were staggering. If Maya's findings were correct, every human being walked through life with a sophisticated evil processing system running in the background, generating dark possibilities that most people never acted upon. But why? What evolutionary purpose could such a system serve? She thought about her own scan, taken just yesterday. Even she, dedicated to understanding human goodness, possessed the shadow circuit. In the quiet moments between consciousness and sleep, her brain had apparently been busy calculating how to destroy her colleagues' careers, manipulate her students' emotions, and exploit every relationship in her life for maximum personal advantage. Maya stood up abruptly, knocking over her coffee mug. The brown liquid spread across research papers that suddenly felt meaningless. How could she teach about human compassion when every brain she'd studied was essentially a biological computer designed for exploitation? How could she look at her students, her friends, even her own reflection, knowing what lurked beneath the surface of every smile and kind gesture? Her phone buzzed with a text from her research assistant, Phoenix. "Professor Blackwood, the University Ethics Board wants to meet about our study. They received some concerning reports about our methodology. Can we talk?" Maya's blood ran cold. She'd been careful to follow all protocols, but perhaps someone had noticed the unusual nature of her findings. Or worse, Maybe someone else had discovered the shadow circuit and was working to suppress her research. The academic world was cutthroat enough without revolutionary discoveries that could fundamentally alter how society viewed human nature. She grabbed her keys and headed for the door, her mind racing. If the ethics board shut down her research now, the world would continue believing in the fundamental goodness of humanity, while remaining blind to the evil machinery operating in every human brain. But if her findings went public, the consequences could be catastrophic. How do you tell 7 billion people that they're all potential monsters? As Maya stepped into the hallway, she noticed something she'd never paid attention to before. The way her colleague Dr. Peterson's eyes lingered just a fraction too long on her chest. The micro-expression of satisfaction that crossed the janitor's face when students slipped on the wet floor he'd just mocked. The calculating look the department secretary gave every professor who asked for favors. Were these glimpses of the shadow circuit breaking through? Had she been walking through a world full of barely contained predators her entire life, too naive to recognize the signs? Maya's heels clicked against the marble floors of the administrative building as she made her way to the ethics committee meeting. Her stomach churned with each step, not just from nervousness, but from a growing awareness of every micro-expression, every subtle power play happening around her. It was as if discovering the shadow circuit had activated some kind of hypervigilance in her own brain. The ethics boardroom felt different than it had during her previous presentations. Dr. Harrison, the committee chair, sat with his fingers steepled in a way that suddenly seemed predatory rather than thoughtful. Dr. Martinez, usually warm and encouraging, kept glancing at Maya with what now appeared to be calculated assessment rather than genuine concern. "Professor Blackwood," Dr. Harrison began, his voice carrying an undertone Maya had never noticed before. "We've received some troubling reports about your current research methodology. Specifically, concerns about informed consent and the psychological impact of your findings on participants." Maya felt her own shadow circuit activate, generating a dozen manipulative responses before she consciously chose her words. "I've followed every protocol outlined in my approved research proposal. All participants signed comprehensive consent forms and understood they were participating in brain imaging studies related to moral decision-making. But did they understand that you were essentially looking for evidence of inherent evil in their neural patterns?" Dr. Martinez interjected, leaning forward with what Maya now recognized as barely concealed aggression disguised as academic concern. The question hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Maya realized she was trapped in a catch-22. If she denied looking for evidence of evil, she'd be lying. If she admitted it, she'd validate their concerns about traumatizing participants. But more importantly, she was beginning to understand that this meeting wasn't really about ethics at all. "How exactly did you become aware of my specific research focus?" Maya asked carefully. "My hypothesis wasn't detailed in any of the documentation I submitted to this board." Dr. Harrison's smile was thin and cold. "We have our sources, Professor Blackwood. The academic community is smaller than you might think, and revolutionary claims about human nature tend to generate interest from various Stakeholders. Maya's blood pressure spiked. Someone had been monitoring her research, possibly even accessing her preliminary findings. But who and why? Her shadow circuit helpfully supplied several paranoid scenarios involving government agencies, pharmaceutical companies, and academic rivals who might want to control or suppress her discoveries. "I'm going to ask you directly, Professor," Dr. Martinez said, her tone shifting to something that sounded almost threatening. "Are you prepared to halt this research until we can conduct a more thorough review of its potential societal implications?" The word societal struck Maya as particularly interesting. This wasn't just about participant welfare anymore. Somehow, the ethics board had become aware of the broader implications of her findings. The idea that every human brain contained sophisticated machinery for evil wasn't just academically interesting. It was potentially civilization-threatening information. "I need to understand something," Maya said, feeling her own calculating instincts sharpen. "Are you suggesting that certain types of knowledge about human nature should remain hidden? Because that seems like a dangerous precedent for any academic institution." Dr. Harrison's expression hardened. "We're suggesting that some discoveries require careful handling. The wrong information in the wrong hands could cause significant social disruption." Maya stood up abruptly, her decision crystallizing. "Are you threatening me, Dr. Harrison?" "Of course not," he replied, but his smile suggested otherwise. "We're simply asking for your cooperation in ensuring that potentially harmful research is conducted with appropriate oversight." As Maya gathered her papers, she noticed something that chilled her to the bone. Dr. Martinez was taking notes, but not about the conversation. She was sketching what appeared to be a detailed floor plan of Maya's laboratory, complete with security camera positions and entry points. Walking out of that room, Maya realized she'd stumbled into something much bigger than a simple ethics review. Her research had apparently touched a nerve with people who had the power and motivation to make her disappear entirely. The question now wasn't whether she could continue her research. It was whether she could survive long enough to share her findings with the world. Her phone buzzed with another message from Phoenix. "Professor, my apartment was broken into last night. Nothing stolen, but all my research notes were photographed. We need to meet somewhere safe. This is bigger than we thought." Maya met Phoenix at a 24-hour diner on the outskirts of Chicago, far from the university district where they might be recognized. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows on Phoenix's face as he slid into the booth across from her. His usually confident demeanor had been replaced by something Maya had never seen before: genuine fear. "They weren't subtle about it," Phoenix said, stirring sugar into his coffee with shaking hands. "Every drawer opened, every file cabinet searched, but nothing actually taken. They wanted me to know they'd been there. It's psychological warfare, Professor." Maya studied her research assistant's face, noting the dark circles under his eyes and the way he kept glancing toward the diner's exit. But something else caught her attention, a micro-expression of satisfaction that flickered across his features when he described the break-in. Her newly heightened awareness of the shadow circuit made her question everything, even her trust in Phoenix. Show me what you managed to save, she said carefully, testing his reaction. Phoenix reached into his jacket and pulled out a flash drive. I'd already backed up everything to multiple encrypted locations. They got copies of our data, but they don't have exclusive access. He paused, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that felt almost predatory. But Professor, there's something else. Something I discovered in the data that you haven't seen yet. Maya's pulse quickened. What kind of something? The shadow circuit isn't just generating evil scenarios randomly, Phoenix said, leaning closer. It's learning. Each scan we've done shows the circuit becoming more sophisticated, more detailed in its calculations. But here's the really disturbing part. It seems to be influenced by proximity to other shadow circuits. The implications hit Maya like a physical blow. You're saying it's contagious? Not contagious exactly, but responsive. When we scanned participants in groups, their shadow circuits showed synchronized patterns. Almost like they were communicating with each other, sharing strategies, and amplifying each other's dark calculations. Maya thought about the ethics board meeting, how she'd suddenly become hyper-aware of everyone's micro-expressions and hidden motivations. Phoenix, when did you first become conscious of your own shadow circuit? His smile was sharp and knowing. The same day you did, Professor, the day we ran our first scans. It's like discovering it activates it somehow. Once you know it's there, you can't unknow it. The diner suddenly felt too small, too exposed. Maya realized that her research hadn't just revealed the existence of universal evil, machinery in human brains. It had apparently awakened that machinery in everyone who encountered the findings. She and Phoenix weren't just researchers anymore. They were carriers of a kind of psychological contagion. We need to destroy the research, Maya said quietly. Phoenix's laugh was cold and utterly unlike his usual warm chuckle. Do we, Professor? Or do we need to embrace what we've learned? Think about it. Every person walking around believing in their own fundamental goodness is living a lie. Every act of kindness, every charitable gesture, every expression of love is just the conscious mind overriding the brain's true default setting. Maya stared at her research assistant, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. The eager graduate student who'd volunteered for her project had been replaced by something calculating and dangerous. Or maybe this had always been Phoenix's true nature, and her research had simply stripped away his carefully constructed facade. You're enjoying this, she said, the realization hitting her like ice water. Aren't you? Phoenix countered. For the first time in your life, you understand what people really are. You can see through every smile, every kind gesture, every protestation of goodness. You have access to the truth about human nature that philosophers and theologians have debated for millennia. Maya stood up abruptly, but Phoenix grabbed her wrist. His grip was firm, almost painful, and his eyes held a coldness she'd never seen before. Where are you going, Professor? Back to your comfortable delusions about human goodness? Back to teaching students about compassion and empathy while ignoring the evil computer running in their heads? His voice dropped to a whisper. Or are you going to help me figure out how to use this knowledge? Maya pulled free and back toward the door, her mind racing. The research hadn't just revealed the shadow circuit, it had activated it in everyone who understood the findings. She was no longer dealing with an academic discovery. She was dealing with a psychological weapon that turned knowledge itself into a form of corruption. As she pushed through the diner's exit, she heard Phoenix call after her. "You can't run from what you've learned, Professor. The shadow circuit is awake now. In you, in me, and soon in everyone else." Maya drove through the empty Chicago streets, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Phoenix's words echoed in her mind, but worse than his threats was the growing realization that he might be right. She could feel her own shadow circuit humming with activity, generating an endless stream of dark calculations about everyone and everything around her. At a red light, she watched a homeless man approach cars asking for change. Her conscious mind felt compassion, but her shadow circuit was busy analyzing his technique, noting which emotional appeals were most effective, calculating how she could exploit similar vulnerabilities in others. The awareness was like having a parasite in her brain, one that she couldn't ignore now that she knew it was there. Her phone rang, interrupting the disturbing internal monologue. The caller ID showed her sister's number. "Maya, thank God you answered. Something weird is happening with Tom." Her sister Sarah's voice was strained with worry. Tom was Sarah's teenage son, Maya's nephew whom she adored. What kind of weird? "He's been asking really disturbing questions about people's motivations. Yesterday he told me he could see through everyone's performance of goodness. That's exactly how he phrased it. Maya, it's like he suddenly understands things about human nature that no 16-year-old should understand." Maya's blood ran cold. "Sarah, has Tom been reading any of my research? Any academic papers or—" "That's the thing. He says he learned it from watching your latest video lectures online, the ones about moral psychology. He's been obsessed with them for weeks." Maya pulled over to the side of the road, her heart pounding. She'd recorded several lectures for the university's online portal, discussing preliminary findings about neural pathways and moral decision-making. Nothing explicit about the shadow circuit, but apparently enough to trigger the awakening in susceptible minds. "Sarah, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Don't let Tom watch any more of those lectures. In fact, keep him away from any of my research materials. Maya, you're scaring me. What exactly have you discovered?" Before Maya could answer, she heard her nephew's voice in the background. "Tell Aunt Maya that once you see the shadow circuit, you can't unsee it. Tell her that knowledge is the virus, and we're all infected now." The line went dead. Maya sat in her car, staring at the phone screen as the full horror of the situation became clear. Her research wasn't just revealing the shadow circuit, it was activating it. And not just in direct participants, but in anyone who encountered even second-hand information about the findings. The knowledge itself was acting like a psychological contagion, spreading through academic networks, online platforms, and casual conversations. She thought about every student she'd taught, every colleague she'd discussed her work with, every family member who'd asked about her research over dinner. How many minds had she already infected? How many people were now walking around with their shadow circuits fully awakened and operational? Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Professor Blackwood, you don't know me, but I'm Dr. Elena Martinez's graduate student. She asked me to contact you. We need to meet immediately. The shadow circuit phenomenon is spreading faster than we anticipated, and we have a serious problem. Another message followed. By our calculations, exposure to shadow circuit awareness increases aggressive behavior by 400% within 72 hours. Empathy responses decrease by 60%. Professor, we're looking at a potential breakdown of social cooperation on a massive scale. Maya's hands were shaking as she typed back, "Who is we?" The response came immediately. A group of researchers who discovered the same phenomena independently. We've been monitoring its spread through academic networks. Professor Blackwood, your nephew isn't the only teenager showing accelerated shadow circuit activation. We're tracking similar cases across multiple universities and high schools. Maya started her car and pulled back onto the road, her mind racing. If there were other researchers who had made similar discoveries, it meant the shadow circuit wasn't just some anomaly she'd stumbled upon. It was a fundamental aspect of human neurology that had somehow remained hidden until now. But more terrifying was the implication that this knowledge, once released, couldn't be contained. She thought about the ethics board meeting, Dr. Harrison's threats, and Dr. Martinez's suspicious behavior. Had they been trying to protect her research or protect society from it? And if there were already multiple research groups aware of the shadow circuit, how long before the knowledge reached a tipping point where it became impossible to suppress? As Maya drove through the night toward an address the mysterious graduate student had provided, she realized she was no longer just a researcher who had made a disturbing discovery. She had become patient zero in an outbreak of awareness that could fundamentally alter human civilization. The question now wasn't whether she could control her findings, it was whether anyone could stop what she had already set in motion. Maya arrived at an abandoned warehouse on Chicago's South Side, her rational mind screaming that this was a trap, while her shadow circuit calculated the various ways she could be eliminated. The building looked derelict from the outside, but she noticed the subtle signs of recent security upgrades, new locks, reinforced windows, and cameras positioned at strategic angles. Inside, she found herself in a sophisticated laboratory that rivaled anything at the university. Banks of computer monitors displayed brain scans, statistical models, and what appeared to be real-time tracking of social media posts mentioning concepts related to moral psychology and human evil. At least a dozen researchers worked frantically at various stations, their faces illuminated by the glow of data that Maya was beginning to recognize as fundamentally dangerous. Professor Blackwood. A woman approached her, extending a hand. "I'm Dr. Amara Voss. We've been expecting you." Maya studied the woman carefully. Dr. Voss appeared to be in her 40s, with prematurely gray hair and the kind of intense focus that Maya associated with researchers who had discovered something they wished they could forget. But there was something else in her eyes, a coldness that suggested her own shadow circuit was not just awakened but fully integrated into her conscious decision-making. "How many of you are there?" Maya asked. 17 research teams across 12 countries, Dr. Voss replied. "We've all stumbled onto different aspects of what you're calling the shadow circuit. The phenomenon appears to be emerging simultaneously worldwide, which suggests we're dealing with some kind of evolutionary development rather than a random discovery." Maya felt a chill run down her spine. Evolutionary development? Dr. Voss led her to a wall covered with charts and graphs. "Our theory is that human consciousness has been suppressing awareness of the shadow circuit for thousands of years. But modern technology, brain imaging, social media, global communication networks has created conditions where this suppression is breaking down." Maya studied the data, her trained eye quickly recognizing the patterns. "You're saying the shadow circuit was always there, but something is causing it to become conscious?" "Exactly. And once it becomes conscious in enough individuals, it appears to accelerate the process in others through what we can only describe as psychological contagion." Dr. Voss pulled up a global map on a nearby monitor. Red dots appeared in major cities across the world, pulsing like a virus spreading through the human population. Each dot represents a confirmed case of shadow circuit awakening. The rate of spread is exponential. Maya watched in horror as the dots multiplied in real time. "How long before it reaches critical mass?" "Our model suggests 6 months, maybe less." Dr. Voss's voice was matter-of-fact, but her hands were trembling. "Once approximately 30% of any population becomes consciously aware of their shadow circuits, social cooperation breaks down entirely. We're essentially looking at the end of civilization as we know it." Maya felt the weight of responsibility crushing down on her. Her research, her lectures, her well-intentioned attempts to understand human morality had apparently triggered a species-wide psychological apocalypse. But even as guilt overwhelmed her, she could feel her shadow circuit calculating ways to profit from the chaos, ways to use the breakdown of social order to her advantage. "There has to be a way to stop it," Maya said, though part of her mind was already questioning whether she actually wanted to stop it. Dr. Voss smiled, and Maya recognized the expression as one she'd been seeing more frequently. The cold satisfaction of someone whose shadow circuit had taken control. "That's where you're wrong, Professor. We don't want to stop it. We want to control it." Maya backed toward the door, but it was too late. She realized that the other researchers in the lab weren't working to contain the shadow circuit outbreak, they were working to accelerate it. Every person in this room had already been fully corrupted by their own awakened evil machinery, and now they were using their knowledge to systematically destroy the psychological foundations of human society. "You see, Professor," Dr. Voss continued, her voice taking on an almost hypnotic quality, "once you truly understand what humans are, once you see past the illusions of kindness and morality, you realize that the current system is built on lies. We're offering humanity the gift of truth about its own nature." Maya's phone buzzed with messages from her sister, her students, her colleagues. All of them were reporting the same thing. People around them were changing, becoming colder, more calculating, more openly selfish. The shadow circuit awakening was spreading through her personal network like wildfire, and she was the one who had lit the match. As Maya stood in that warehouse laboratory, surrounded by researchers who had chosen to embrace their own evil rather than fight it, she faced the most important decision of her life. She could join them, accepting that human nature was fundamentally corrupt and helping to accelerate society's transformation into something darker, but perhaps more honest. Or she could find a way to fight back, to develop some kind of psychological inoculation against the shadow circuit awakening, even knowing that it might already be too late. The choice would determine not just her own fate, but the future of human civilization itself. What choice would you make if you discovered the dark truth about human nature? Would you embrace the shadow circuit or fight against it? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more psychological thrillers that will keep you questioning everything you thought you knew about the human mind. Share this story with someone who thinks they understand people. They might be in for a shocking surprise. Hit that notification bell, because the next story in this series will reveal whether Maya can find a way to stop the psychological apocalypse she accidentally started.